Welcome to a special edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 198, the Primates Gathering edition. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today, September 16th, 2015.
Okay, welcome to a breaking news edition of Anglican Unscripted. George, each week we start off the program with personal items of news. Obviously, people know that Jill, I, and family have been holed up in a Motel 6 for 27 days. We finally got paroled by Bank of America and have now moved into the condo. I would show you the condo, but Mrs. Carlson, Mrs. Anglican TV, would kill me, as there are boxes everywhere. George, you guys had quite a fright this week. What's going on?
Well, my mother had a heart attack in the parking lot of the chemotherapy center. She had just gone through 8 hours of chemotherapy, was getting in the car when she collapsed, taken to the hospital, and on Monday she had surgery, and I'm very pleased to say it went well. And gosh, we're just so fortunate, and thank goodness for Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean, it was the best investment money could buy.
Yeah, our viewers are not only paying for her care, but they're praying for her care. And we want to thank you for that. Keep us in your prayers. Back to the breaking news. We woke up this morning to a news release at about 5 p.m. London time, about noon here, that Archbishop Justin Welby has called for a primates meeting in January, I guess the 11th to the 16th. And as you have heard before, there was not going to be another Lambeth. Nobody knew when there was going to be another primates meeting. So this is kind of exciting news that maybe things are starting to pick up again. But there's a lot of baggage that comes along with having these primates come back together after the fabric of the communion has been torn. So George and I want to get into that, but the first thing that I found out is I read the headline, Primates Meeting. When I read the article, I learned something different, George.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. I've had to change I wrote the headline for the story in Anglican Ink, and I said, Welby calls primates meeting.
Yay!
And then I reread the story, and it hit me that this is not a primates meeting. Mm-hmm. They never once called a primates meeting. It's a primates gathering. And that distinction, it's not just semantics, but it's a vital distinction that allows this meeting to go forward with some hope of success.
Well, it's distinct because I know that a couple of provinces have written rules that they will not attend any instruments of unity if the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church of Canada attend, George.
Correct. The Church of Uganda, for example, on its books has a rule saying we're not going to Lambeth Conference's primates meeting and so forth if Catherine Jefferts Schori and Company are there. Mm-hmm. So that's why they stayed away at 2008. So if a primates meeting were called, mm-hmm. then you could just, without even thinking, say, well, Uganda's not going to be there. A gathering is different.
It is, because this is the second gathering Justin has had. His first gathering was at his installation.
Yes.
He invited the primates. They attended. Some of them showed up for the tea and biscuits after the meeting and had some conversation and some patting on the back with the new archbishop. But this next gathering is going to be much different because they're going to start to address some issues, they hope, George.
Correct. If this is being cast in such a way that the Nigerians, for example, can come. Mm-hmm. Nicholas Oko went to the installation of Justin Welby. He would not attend a primates meeting called by Justin Welby. So the gathering allows Oko and Stanley Ntagali of Uganda and Eliud Wabukula, all the GAFCON guys, to go. And an olive branch was handed out to Foley Beach. Mm-hmm. Foley Beach is going. Now, and that was the last paragraph in the press release. Now, you can read it in a negative light saying, oh, well, he's not going to be invited to everything. Well, it doesn't really matter because this is an unofficial gathering. So Foley Beach doesn't go to the morning Eucharist. That's not such a big deal because half the Africans won't go either.
Well, but the interesting part about this is up until this point, it was no Foley, no peace. No Foley, no peace. If you're not going to invite Archbishop Foley, don't even bother inviting us. Now he's been invited as a observer, like you and I, and we'll have to see what happens here. I understand you had an off-the-record conversation with Archbishop today.
No, well, I cannot confirm or deny any
Okay,
such thing.
we'll cut that out. So, what happens from here, George?
Foley Beach is going. How he goes, that's going to be negotiated in advance by the GAFCON primates.
Right.
At this stage, we know that Michael Curry, the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, is going. Foley Beach has put out a statement saying if the GAFCON primates are going, he is going.
Now, this news is so breaking that we don't know if GAFCON is going, because right now it's about 9:49 a.m. in Sydney, where GAFCON headquarters is. How soon can we expect a response from the heads of GAFCON?
Well, the individual people have expressed the desire to go. The collective statement, that'll take a day or two because, as you mentioned, it's first, this came out while everybody in Sydney was asleep, and that's where the GAFCON Secretariat is. So they can't make a formal statement until they look at everything, and by the time they look at it today, everybody in Africa is asleep. So it's going to be a day or two before everybody's on the same wavelength. But they're wheels within wheels within wheels. Justin Welby went and visited every single province of the Anglican community. He also met, I believe, with Bob Duncan, and I think there have been private conversations with Foley Beach, not official ones. So Justin Welby knows the lie of the land, and he knows that there's a willingness for people to talk so long as they're not compelled to back down upon their firmly held beliefs. And Welby is starting from that premise, that we can all gather and agree to disagree in an informal setting, and not make it a do or die session, that if this doesn't work, then the end is here.
Well, he bent over backwards to also mention Lambeth 1998 in the press release.
You have to distinguish between the press release and the press officer's take given to the Guardian newspaper. In other words, we've got 2 or 3 levels of interpretation there, and by the time it's in the Guardian's hands,
It's over.
it's factually correct, but there's so many assumptions, and that it's a news analysis piece. It's not reporting.
I'm sorry. It's how to put every fallacy in one paragraph. News reporting.
But let me sort of focus in on why this meeting. I want to focus on 2 points.
Sure.
What I believe Welby hopes to achieve, worst case and best case scenario, and why Welby is doing this. He's met with everybody. He's said in the press release that I can't let this situation continue for the sake of my successor. Well, Welby's got at least 10 more years, so I don't really think that's the issue. Welby needs to solidify his right flank within the Church of England. Having a meeting where he's able to speak with the GAFCON people prevents the AMIE from exploding prematurely. It allows him to work out some negotiated arrangements within the Church of England. A meeting right now is fantastic news for the Episcopal Church. Yes, the shrill liberals, would say, no, hell no, we won't go, all this and that. But the smart money within the Episcopal Church realizes that they're in a free fall. They need to basically consolidate the gains that they have right now. So that if they go into a meeting and they're able to come out with what they have recognized as being somehow within the pale, that's a tremendous victory.
Well, I think
And if ACNA has a meeting and they come out as recognized as a de facto province of the Anglican Communion, they have achieved. They're never going to replace the Episcopal Church. In other words, we're not going to have a swap of one is and one is not. But we're going to see, I believe, if Welby is successful, 2 Anglican provinces in the United States and Canada.
I agree, coming out of this meeting, that Archbishop Welby will be recognized as the Archbishop of the ACNA, and the ACNA will be recognized as a member of the Anglican Communion. But we saw in this some of these interviews with the press people that a worst case scenario is much different. It's more like the Orthodox Church, where
No, actually, Kevin, that's the best case scenario.
Oh, is that the best case
That's
scenario?
not the worst case. The worst case scenario is that we continue right now with a broken communion, people fighting and hating each other.
Yeah.
Now, strictly speaking, the communion has been broken since 1976, the ordination of women priests in the Episcopal Church.
That was the biggest part, yeah.
Up until that time, a priest in any part of the Anglican Communion was a priest in any other part of the Anglican Communion.
Mm-hmm.
The introduction of women clergy unilaterally by the Hong Kong and the Episcopal Church and New Zealand and places like that shattered that unity. Now, we've reached a point where we've agreed to disagree, and we have what they call dual integrities. And even within the conservative movement, there are dual integrities. Uganda and Kenya really believe absolutely as part of God's revelation and plan for humanity that women should be priests.
Mm-hmm.
The Nigerians
and soon bishops.
And soon bishops. The Nigerians and some of the Anglo-Catholic groups think God is spoken clearly through Scripture and the tradition of the church, and it ain't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got... Now, the difference is the Episcopal Church went ahead and did it anyway, while the Nigerians and the Kenyans have held off on women bishops.
Unity is more important to them than having their way, correct, yes.
So we have, over the past, really, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
had some form of broken communion, but you're right. Since Lambeth 2008, there's no fooling anybody.
Mm-hmm.
It is shattered. The best case scenario, I believe, is what I call the Orthodox option. Now, what is that? What I think that Foley Beach...
Justin Welby.
Well, no, what I think Foley Beach would go for, and I think Michael Curry would go for, is if Foley Beach came up with an Orthodox-type system. In the Orthodox world, everybody's in communion with the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople, Istanbul.
Right.
But the Russians, Orthodox Church, are not in communion with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They hate each other. They overlap. In fact, they're trying to kill each other.
I was going to say, if you wanted to bring weapons into this, that's the example of the Orthodox Church.
So we can now say that the United States will be the Ukraine of the Anglican world. In other words, finding a way for everybody to be in communion with Canterbury, but not necessarily have to be in communion with each other.
Which is interesting because, I always bring up the point, can there be two gospels for the church? And, if at the end of the day, GAFCON has agreed to be in communion with the Episcopal Church, it's agreeing to a dual gospel.
Kevin, Anglicanism had dual gospels since the Oxford movement.
I don't disagree with that.
In other words,
that's not an excuse to continue the problem.
Correct, but you're not going to resolve the... I look at, for me, as a purist, I look at some of the things coming out of the New ACNA liturgies, and I say to myself, these aren't Anglican. I don't believe in 7 sacraments. I believe in 2 sacraments. And
I'm a 2 guy.
Now, 150 years ago, these were fighting words that, we would anathematize each other, and you're going to go to hell over this and that. Me, I don't think they're right, but hey, I'm not going to be bothered about it. Well, actually it was this year, we had a little feature in the Anglican Ink about confession. Australia, the Anglican Church in Australia has basically said we're going to do away with the confidentiality of a priestly confession. And I wrote a little piece saying, priestly confession a la the Catholic way is an innovation that is not really part of the Anglican way until the Oxford movement and the 19th and 20th century Catholic movement.
And boy, did you get in trouble.
I didn't get in trouble, but it was actually people were, rather than address the history and the theology, people repeated, well, I'm an Anglican priest and I hear confessions, therefore I am the arbiter of all things. Now, I don't particularly get exercise about that because people... But what I'm trying to say is that we live in a broken, fallen world, and the church is part of that brokenness. Mm-hmm. Am I equating the issue of homosexuality with the 7 sacraments or confession or things like that? No, I'm not. Mm-hmm. I think there are much different levels. But the question is, how do we live with a lack of integrity, well, we've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, my point goes even further. Um, if GAFCON people are asking whether or not they should go, of course they should go. People are going to be gathering in the name of Christ, and somebody better be there to defend Christ. And we're called to at all times be defenders of the faith, and to defend Christ. And certainly at a Primus gathering, somebody should be there, and I would like GAFCON to be there on our behalf.
Kevin, you interviewed Henry Arambi in 2007 in
Sure.
Alexandria.
Yes, I do.
And I sat in the background and made faces at you in the camera.
Thank
while
you for that,
talked
by the
to
way.
me. So
Yes.
you were smiling. One of the things Henry Arambi said, what we really need as Anglicans to do is to have a general council like Vatican II, where everybody, Gene Robinson and Henry Arambi, sit down and hammer out these issues. So the very fact of meeting to discuss is not abhorrent to the conservative wing in the African church, for instance. What is abhorrent to them is institutionalizing what they see as bad acts. So they're willing to debate, they're willing to seek God's will, believing that they already have discerned it, but they're willing to talk. And the other thing I want to share, one of the things we've picked up years ago was what we were taught by Lambeth Palace people, is that they're basically waiting for Bob Duncan and Catherine Jefferts Schori to leave the stage, because the issues are personal. Let me put it this way. Every time we write an article about Catherine Jefferts Schori saying something, it gets fantastic hits. I mean, she was the gift that kept on giving. But I would cancel some comments from people who just had such a visceral hatred of her, that they would just start with ad hominem screams and well, I can't use some of the phrases on
Sure.
TV. This is children watch this. Maybe even Baptists, but but people would say that she's not a Christian.
Yeah.
Now and you should hear Bob Duncan was despised by some Episcopal leaders. That degree of hatred and animosity is missing with Foley Beach and Michael Curry. So removing the personal equation is another wheel within the wheels.
It is. However, I don't expect anytime soon full reconciliation, repentance from the Episcopal Church, a full restoration the way God intends it to be. I think going along to get along and making sure that we're all in the same house, even if we live in different rooms, is obviously the goal Justin Welby has. You say that a Russian Orthodox model is a best case scenario. My hope with the Holy Spirit is that we would have full reconciliation with the Episcopal Church by both of us repenting. We shall have to see what happens. We're coming up here on 18 minutes. You got anything quick you want to say?
Yeah, I think there are two little points that I want to make. I agree with you. I don't think that we're going to see momentous change within the ACNA or the Episcopal Church, but we will see some fiddling on the margins. And those margins I think will be expanded. So, for instance, within the Episcopal Church, I think if they're able to achieve what they want and gain some international recognition, the pressure will be off people like me. I see if ACNA gets recognized, it'll be a tremendous boon for them, for instance, in their Canadian lawsuits. Yes, they're legally Anglican too, and so forth. It's a win-win situation for everybody. But the other thing I want to say is that sometimes we don't recognize what faithfulness is. I'm an Episcopal priest in a conservative diocese that is God-fearing diocese. In parts of my diocese, each little town has 2 Episcopal churches. Why is that, Kevin? It's not because one's Anglo-Catholic and one is evangelical.
No.
But the history of my diocese is in that places like Fort Pierce, Orlando, and Daytona Beach, there were white Episcopal churches and black Episcopal churches.
Correct.
That's a legacy that we're seeking to overcome, the legacy of racism and separate but equal church institutions. Kevin, that's taken almost 200 years and we're still not done. So I'm not going to hold my breath on reconciliation between ACNA and TEC.
You're lucky, because nowhere in the New Testament or the Old Testament does it say, put your knee before God and hold your breath. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 198 of Anglican Unscripted.